Again, we've taken over the XFL's YouTube channel, Bryant. It's Alan and Bryant from This Is the XFL Show with Commissioner Oliver Luck. After Phase 2 has just completed, and for us, it's been pretty smooth. Commissioner, how about you? How would you say the first 2 phases have gone?
I think they've gone very well. They've gone, I think, at about the pace we expected. And I think, the technology's worked, which is always important. We had multiple redundancies in case, somebody's Wi-Fi went out at one of the draft rooms, with our clubs, et cetera. I think it's gone all in all very smoothly. A tribute really to the tech folks, and to the testing we had done last week to make sure we had all this sort of lined up. Yeah,
we were joking after we talked to you on our show the other day how this is probably going to be a long way from those old drafts where we're cigar smoke filled rooms. This is a little bit more technological, streamlined, and efficient, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of. The coaches, we can clearly see, have strategy going into this. So I guess overall you could say that the parity aspect of this draft is working. It's gearing the coaches into forming their teams the way they want them to be.
Well, I think the interesting thing as we, as a league, sat and talked about how we thought the draft should be constructed. There were 3 principles we had in mind. One was parity, one was transparency, and one was efficiency. Because you got to draft 560 guys. That's a lot, and you're starting, of course, from zero, from scratch. So I guess you could say you're starting with 1 quarterback, but effectively from scratch. So. The part about the parity, I think, was the most important. That was the principle that I think meant the most to us as we constructed this thing. And if you think about it in terms of a spectrum, on one end of the spectrum you have the traditional draft, what the NFL does every year, which is, all positions are wide open. It's one big pool. You can go all the way down the spectrum to the other side where you could literally draft each position. You could have a left tackle position, then a left guard position, then a left, right? So you could do, so we thought what makes the most sense in terms of providing parity to these teams as they go into training camp, and I think this idea of positional grouping was something that at least on paper, as we thought about it and tried to think of all the unintended consequences, really made some sense. And I think it also gives enough flexibility to a team that may not draft tight ends or an H-back or a fullback, but loads up on slot receivers or whatever, right? Because everybody's going to be a little bit different with their personnel groupings.
The different schemes and the different systems. It's all up to the coaches, really, on this one. I was going to ask, not what went into, but was the coaches that gave input as well into this whole process about making this as much parity as possible? Was this all league or?
Well, I think, generally speaking, the principles, were universal. I can't imagine any other group trying to come up with different principles. You obviously want transparency, so fans, can kind of follow this and see what's going on. You want efficiency because it's hard to, scout 1,000 guys and then rank them and then deal with the draft. You want parity, obviously, because we want to get to a point where season starts and we're playing 43 to 42 games, not 43 to nothing or whatever. So those principles, I think, came from us. We discussed with the coaches and with the DPPs, directors of player personnel, the football ops guys. So there was a pretty robust discussion over the summer of the best way to do it and when to do it. Right? Yeah. Because we're not, going to, as you guys know, we're not going to our mini camps until early December. But we also thought, we've got to, get the basis of the roster in place, and that there'll be an additional draft coming up, a supplemental draft, and then there'll be some sort of waiver system after that we use, for players to be replaced. So there's going to be plenty of movement still. So I think all in all, it was, like most decisions, a group decision, because I certainly want our coaches to buy into what we're doing so they can sort of attack that challenge with vigor and confidence and understand that everybody's in the same boat and we're all trying to get to the same place, which is play good football.
Right. And it sounds like they're having a good time. Some camps are hooting and hollering after every single pick. 2 phases through, and I'm sure you haven't gotten any yet, but I'm sure these coaches will give you some feedback, and it seems like they're going to give positive feedback on this format.
Yeah, we certainly will accept whatever feedback, and there very well could be some suggestions about how to do it better or do it a little bit differently, and we'll listen to those and make decisions. But I think it's gone well. We've had lots of discussions leading up to this. So everybody was operating with the same basis, and it's a lot of guys in the draft pool. I mean, there's over 1,000 in the draft pool. That's a lot of talent to look at into grade.
It's fun. It's funny watching as a fan a draft like this because you see a pick and your tendency is to maybe overreact to watching old regular drafts, but then you go, oh, well, they need to fill this entire roster, so yeah, they need to make these picks.
Well, no, you don't see a draft where you're picking 10 wide receivers, right? I mean,
exactly.
It doesn't happen. You might get 1 or 2, and that's it.
Yeah, and you're really seeing the personalities of the coaches, I think, too, and so you can't fault Bob Stoops for taking wide receivers or as many as he did early on because this is how they want to shape their team, which is the most fascinating aspect of the draft.
Do you really see the coaches kind of? You talked about how there was a lot of pre-drafts, right? There was a lot of mock drafts. Are they sticking to those guns a little bit, or is it kind of just still everyone's still flying by the seat of the pants? Because 90 seconds is not a lot of time to react to something that maybe you didn't expect was going to happen.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I haven't really focused that much on a team's draft board or who they're thinking about or who they're looking at. That's
Sure.
But the process of it has been
I think
to that.
Yeah, I think they've all gone through, more or less the same steps, right? And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get our head coaches on board early. And as you guys know, we had, coaches I think as early as February that were hired, and then they in turn, got their staffs put together. We did that early so that they could do a lot of the work in terms of scouting. So you had, some of the teams had their staffs fully complete, assistant coaches, DPPs, et cetera. In June and July, and then everybody visited the NFL training camps and took all the time and to rank the players and all that. So I think the process by each team was relatively similar, and the DPPs have done a pretty good job. Many of whom have had experience with the AAF, and virtually all of whom have had some role with an NFL team over the years. So I think we have pretty well-rounded groups, if you will, that we're looking at at the talent.
And in terms of time to do all this preparation for today's event tomorrow and afterwards, I think we could say giving runway the amount of time was very important for all these coaches and the DPPs and everybody to scout, to prep for today, and moving on from now into the mini camps and the training camps. I mean, was that a central goal, making sure there's this amount of time for preparation for these events?
Yes. No, I mean, if you think about it, our really only goal, as we sort of mapped out, starting about a year ago, sort of mapped out, the timelines, the runway to the start of the season, our goal was to play good football February 8th. And what does that mean? That means you need a certain, number of weeks with full pad, contact, training camp. You need a certain number of weeks to install your offense, defense, special teams, which in our mind is the mini camp. In December, you need to get the staffs on board. They got to have enough time to look at the talent and draft. You're only as good as the players that you have in the field. So there was a lot of thought given to sort of the runway, right? And we had to do that, knowing, as you guys know, knowing that we're a startup, we had to do that without spending a ton of money, right? So we had to be, somewhat prudent in how we organized it, arranged it, et cetera. How many players do you start training camp with? When are the cuts for training camp, et cetera? All that sort of stuff. So I think we've got, a pretty good system in place that will allow us to play good, crisp, exciting, fun football come February.
What about within the season? Are you going to allow teams to kind of make their own transactions, trades? Has that been discussed at all? Because that's kind of something that we've never really seen in spring football. Rosters are usually set in place, and you don't see this competitive, hey, I'll trade you this for this. Are you going to see something like that? Are we going to see anything like that?
Yeah, there'll be a series of sort of player personnel regulations that we'll put into place, and we'll allow for trades. It's hard to imagine there'll be that many because it's a brand new league. It's a brand new season, right? Brand new guys. But who knows? We want to give enough flexibility to the teams that if they feel like they want to make a trade and they're willing to offer something up, that we can do that. The one thing that we think a lot about and really don't have any idea of what it's going to look like, we don't know how much churn we're going to have on our roster. In other words, from year 1 to year 2, we just don't know. We sort of think, well, maybe it's going to be 50%. So at the end of the season, every team on average will lose about 50% of its players, whether they have an NFL opportunity and take advantage of that, or just decide to retire. Could be 20%, could be 80%. We just don't know. And part of, I think, sort of the personnel, regulations that we're considering, you have to, in a sense, we have to contemplate what's year 2 going to look like, and how much, carryover is there going to be, because then we have to figure out, the schedule for year 2. Year 1 in this lead up is going to be different than year 2,
Oh, yeah.
and years 3, et cetera. So that's a lot of these sort of issues that we're dealing with. We don't have firm answers at this point because we're trying to sort of speculate as best we can on what the situation we think will look like.
Yeah, a phrase you used the last time we were on our show was a moment in time. We are in a moment of time right now with this draft. Unique, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these are going to continue to evolve even after today's draft day, right? You don't know what's going to happen with the supplemental draft and then come mini camps and with any personnel. So what's happening today is great, but these are going to continue to evolve after today.
Yeah, it will. I mean, there's so many factors in this great game of football that can come into play, injuries, and again, not having a real solid idea of what kind of. And if we do our job well and really, train up these guys and play good football, I could see, a whole bunch of them having NFL opportunities. Yeah. Because we know that the NFL scouts will be all over our mini camps and training camps and in the season. So those are things we have to see, and we have to be flexible enough to manage through those.
And that's also where Eric and Doug and personnel and scouting, that doesn't stop after today. We talked to them about that. Their job continues because it is going to be so different moving from not even to year 2, but from now through January to February. We're going to see players also try to come and enter the league after this, and you might not necessarily use the phase format in next year's draft. We know that's stuff you have to adapt to. In the immediate, though, for the players that get drafted today and tomorrow, what can they expect next? What will they be doing? Will they be reporting to teams not till December? Are they going to be able to communicate?
So
with
yeah,
their teams?
The schedule for the guys who are drafted today and tomorrow, we'll have lots of contact with them. A number of them will be in their markets, and we'll start to sort of understand the offenses, defenses, special teams, right, the terminology. They won't actually sign playing contracts until we begin minicamp. So they'll start their minicamp early December, take their physical, which is sort of the prerequisite for signing a contract, and then sign their deal, and then truly practice begins. But there'll be a handful of guys in market that are starting to do some work, a lot of chalkboard work. And we may end up doing a lot of sort of chalkboard work via the internet, right? Zoom or Skype or whatever. And we'll be starting to share playbooks with the players, and and they'll be working out. Obviously, they'll be receiving a whole bunch of information about the traditional HR type stuff, and also performance plans in terms of working out and getting in shape for the season, et cetera. So the season's effectively starting pretty soon for most of these guys.
Yeah, the planning and preparation for the on-field stuff, and I'm also excited to see these players get in their markets and maybe become part of them. The community outreach, the fan engagement part of it is going to be really interesting.
Well, I think as you know, Cardale Jones was in D.C. today, and we'll be there for the extended time period working with Pep and his staff, but also doing lots of appearances, et cetera. And the same thing has been happening in the other markets as well. So we'll just add to those guys, if you will, like Cardale, who are in the market and doing some work.
What about these team meet and greets? I've gone to a lot of them for the LA Wildcats. I'm in the LA area, so it's been a lot of fun. Really great interaction with coaches and the presidents, Heather Carrots out there. Can we expect more of those on a weekly basis? How do those help mold the markets into themselves now that you have players?
Yeah, well, now that we have players, it's obviously something that we can sort of hang our hat on, and you can see there's a little bit of a tendency to for at least a couple teams to draft guys, that were local stars, right? Sure. The Seattle drafts the University of Washington product. Imagine that, right? So, I think there'll be a number of guys really in market that can begin to be highlighted and attend lots of the fan events. So I think you'll see a lot more intense fan engagement from the teams as we go forward, because they've got faces, they've got bodies, they've got players.
Yeah, they have the personalities now are part of the team. Even though, in LA, Winston Moss is probably enough for the whole team,
yeah,
right?
True.
But Winston can light up the Christmas tree all by himself.
Yeah, it's been fun to see their reactions today during the draft. The glimpse you're giving fans. I mean, we did not expect this kind of access for the whole global audience today. This just speaks to the transparency of the league, and I'm sure you plan on doing more stuff like this for fans.
Well, there are two things that we've talked about, internally for a long, long time. One is how do we provide more and better access to the fans? They want to see what's behind that door, right? That door has always been closed, and they don't have access to it, and we want to try to at least crack open that door and give them a glimpse of what's behind it. And the second thing is a voice, right? We want the fans to have, to have a voice. So those are things that we're trying to do, whether it's, how we construct the draft, whether it's, what our broadcast partners do during practice or during games. I mean, almost everything that we're engaged with, we're trying to ask ourselves, are we giving good access to the fans? And basically, you guys as media guys, right?
Yeah.
You're the voice to a certain degree of the fans, and sort of the access point.
Yeah, we started as a fan. We're a fan podcast, and we're here behind those doors. We're in the room itself. It's insane.
You guys cracked the door open. We busted right through.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
right.
pretty good.
And that we like to tell people, like, we're the embodiment of that, of what the league's trying to do with the fans. Like, there's going to be more people like us interacting with from team to team in the league. It's an incredible, just part of the innovation and the reimagining of the game, because the on-field product you're changing, but also how a league interacts with the fans is what's changing with the XFL, which is also crucial.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real opportunity there for us, right? It has to be authentic, and it has to come from a place, I think, with players and with coaches, where it's genuine and they really want to do it. It's hard after a tough loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
To really interact, because you just want to sort of crawl in the hole sometimes after a game. But so it won't all be easy and maybe not all smooth, but we do think there's some really neat opportunities to reimagine how fans interact with players, with players and coaches.
Mm-hmm.
How that sort of flow goes. Before games, during games, after games, during the week. Even in the off season,
Yeah.
those are cool. Those are kind of cool things to contemplate.
I told people that I was at the Wildcats meet and greet, and I saw the game-winning field. I was talking to Norm Chow next to me, and we were watching the field goal kick. He was breaking down the play for me. He's like 5 yards slant in there, call your timeout. It was the best thing ever.
Watching Monday Night Football
with
Yeah.
Norm Chow. So really,
Yeah.
the fan interaction is going to be great. I can't wait for it to get better and better. I'm a little nervous, a little goosebumps, because I'm just a fan, and being here is amazing, and getting the opportunities that you guys have given us, me and Alan specifically, has been great, and I can't wait to see how that evolves as the season gets closer and closer.
And the interaction with the fans is going to grow with the TV partners coming into the fold too. And we saw some of them from ESPN and Fox are in the building, and they're putting their kind of game plan and plan of attack for when the XFL kicks off together. We're seeing leaks, but nothing official. I don't think we've seen, have we, about announcers who are going to be assigned to these games, and how the networks will approach the league. What kind of relationship will the league have in terms of the production of the games on game day?
So the two partners, Fox and ABC, ESPN, will be in charge of production, and they do a pretty darn good job of producing football games. I'm not, I was trying to think the other day, how many games would have ESPN over the years produced? I mean, it must be hundreds of thousands, right? So they've seen everything. They're equipped for everything. Same thing with Fox. Fox built that network. Murdoch built the network on the back of the NFL, and you go back to the mid '90s. It was critical to have professional football on the network. Now it's considered one of the the four major players. So they're responsible for production. They have asked us a number of different things. Can we do this? Can we do that? And effectively, our answer is always the same. We're the league of yes, right? So within reason, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases they may be asking for a bridge too far, but we want to be the league of yes. We want to be able to really work with the broadcaster. They want the same thing we do, which is to provide great access to their fans, right? Access that may not be available in the NFL or major college conference game. I've had the benefit, I suppose, of working back in the old NFL Europe days with Fox. They were a partner of ours. And during my college time, we worked with both Fox and ESPN. And so I know the give and take and a little bit of how all that is going to play out. But I think they'll produce these games really well. I think there'll be, again, insights into things that may not be available with some of the other contracts that they have. And I'm excited about that. I mean, it's a great, unbelievably great platform for us, and we're in constant contact with them, as you saw today, right?
Yeah.
Tom Luganbill's out there, and Joe Klatt was doing pieces on the guys. They're excited. I mean, they really are pumped up for this, and their talent, which hasn't been announced, although some names were leaked. I mean, their talent views it much like our playing talent. They see this great opportunity to do 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever number of games, and raise their profile, right? The individual guys that are doing the commentary and play-by-play and all that. So it's a good, very symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the television partners, and the platforms are going to be incredible for the league, and it's going to just bring more people. Also, it's going to be circular because it's going to bring more people back to YouTube channel and our show, Bryant, and it's going to build the community, which is what this is all about. Also, is building, just bringing more people into the football fold, and I think the XFL is championing the sport magnificently, especially compared to what we talked about, those like old spring leagues that were behind smoke-filled doors. This is wide open for all the fans. This really feels like a fan celebration type day, today's draft.
Well, I had years ago, somebody showed me, and it was on YouTube, a clip of the first televised NFL draft. And I remember it because I came out of school in 1982 and was part of that 82 draft, and the first time they ever televised it was 1981. And it was at in a meeting room in downtown Manhattan, right? And I'll never forget, George Rogers, the great running back from South Carolina, was the first pick overall that year, went to the Saints. And Pete Rozelle was at the podium, and there was just one camera, right, in the back, and Pete Rozelle was at the podium, and George Rogers was off to the side, and Rozelle said, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 1981 National Football League Draft. We're here at the whatever Marriott, Marquis in downtown Manhattan, wherever. We're at Waldorf in downtown Manhattan, and with the first pick of the 1981 draft, the New Orleans Saints have chosen George Rogers, right?" So George comes up and kind of grabs the podium and says, "Thank you." And so Rozelle just moves a little bit off the screen, but you can still see him, and reaches in his pocket, pulls out a cigarette, lights it up, and is seen as George is making his comments, Pete's just puffing away. And I remember thinking, that's so awesome. It's so authentic. Nobody cared about sort of political correctness back then, and then Rozelle slipped right back in and said, with the second pick of the draft, somebody gave him a piece of, and he was just puffing away. But that's all they needed. And that's the National Football League not that long ago, right? So I thought about that as we were setting up our draft room this past week, because that just stuck with me. I think it's probably still on YouTube or something.
Sure,
Somebody could go find it.
Find it after the draft today.
Right.
Yeah, after today's draft. We've got some phases left. We've got some fun to have, Commissioner. Well, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, letting us in, and giving all these fans out there this access. It's incredible what you guys are doing, and this draft is just another notch, another pillar, another stop on the road to 2020. Kickoff compared to this is going to be, gigantic. We cannot.
Well, it's a big milestone.
Yeah.
A lot of people worked hard, to get here. It's just one of a number of steps, just in terms of how we disperse personnel.
Yeah.
But we are only as good as our coaches and our players, and I think we've got a great group of coaches, and I really do believe we're getting some players that are going to have just an absolute blast playing in this league. It's going to be a little bit different from what they've expected, but I think they're going to have a blast, and that's exciting. So thanks for taking the time, Alan, Brian. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it. Keep it locked to the XFL's YouTube channel the rest of the way. Phase 3 of the draft is coming up, and we will have more content, interviews, and analysis where Brian and I will probably scream at each other a little bit more than we did here about players. All coming up on the XFL's YouTube channel, and follow at XFL 2020 on Twitter. This is the XFL Show. Remember, they're listening.